quickly or there will be trouble.
Of course, machines can't think as people do. The machine is different.
Being, what marvelous being! How gratifying! How gratifying!
Thank you. So thank you, Seth. Thank you, Pedro. Also, he's in the wings. He was very patient with me, corralling me, making sure I was here on time and ready for this presentation. This is the first. I had never watched this movie until a few days ago. So this is fairly new for me too. But my wife Laura, who's in the audience, actually wrote a review for this movie in December of 1986 when it came out. She was then writing movie reviews for the Belgian Weekly Gazette, an expatriate newspaper in Brussels, Belgium. This is topical today. You know, we all are thinking about Brussels and the people there. I'll say a few more words about that review at the end of my presentation. So the first thing I want to say is I suspect most of you are wondering, especially the ones who know something about this movie, most of you are wondering, could this happen? Could what is will be shown on the screen happen? Could that happen? And the simple answer is yes. Okay, as a whole, something very much like what is shown in the story could happen, except I would say for the way in which the robot comes alive. Okay, I would like to spend, yes, you know how it comes alive. So it happens fairly early, so I guess I can tell you. The robot comes alive because it is struck by a bolt of lightning. This is extremely unlikely. I mean, the bolt of lightning would probably destroy the robot's electronics. But it is somewhat interesting from a history of science and literature point of view. It really ties in with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. The idea of electricity being a live force really comes in the mid-1700s when Luigi Galvani did his experiments on frog muscles and detected that by passing currents to the frog muscles they would contract. And so Shelley herself wrote about the genesis of Frankenstein. Perhaps a corpse would be reanimated. Galvanism, that is the study of electricity as done by Galvani, had given token of such things. So very much this is a tribute to the very important work of Shelley. So a robot could do many of the things you see in the movie, starting with identifying military targets and shooting them, serving cocktails at a party, navigating, dealing with animals, mimicking the movement of people and animals, reading an instruction manual very quickly, memorizing an encyclopedia. Of course, some things are much harder than others. For example, extracting entities and relations from a manual or an encyclopedia is an active area of research in computer science. Now it doesn't seem so strange that the robot number 5 can drive a van. That the robot can learn to drive a van as well as many other things. This is, of course, not due to bolts of lightning, but this happens because of the long, hard work of many computer scientists and, I would say, mechanical engineers in the case of robotics. The movie makes fun of computer scientists, especially through the character of Ben, the sidekick of the protagonist. But it also gives tribute to their work. The beginning sequence, the title sequence, I would encourage you to look at this at that carefully. The title sequence is really a beautiful sequence from a beautiful tribute to mechanical engineering. You know, the building of things, all of the movie is done without the use of many computer-generated special effect, computer-generated animation. The robots are real. They were actually built, and things that now we would imagine would be done by computer animation are filmed as they occur. Even the director went to the length of having the robot handler, if you like, talk as the scene was filmed, so that the interaction of people with the robot would be more natural. Shortly, again, within the title sequence, you will realize that the robot's name is Saint. This is the Saint experimental robot number 5. That's the full name of number 5. And Saint itself is a tribute to artificial intelligence. And you can really make a little bit of a history of AI based on this name. And I'll do that, very, very briefly. Saint is actually stands for Symbolic Automated Integrator. Some of you, many of you, I suspect, will remember, possibly with dread, your calculus class at the end of high school or in college, where you had to do integration, roughly computing the area under a curve for the humanists among us. And you remember that this was painful, tedious. You had to memorize a lot of basic integrals and some techniques, and in many cases tricks to carry out symbolic or numeric integration. Well, in 1961, James Slagle, under the direction of Marvin Minsky, wrote a program that, again, was called SAINT to do symbolic integration. At the time, this program was written in Lisp, which is an early programming language that is still heavily used in artificial intelligence programming, because it is especially suited for symbolic non-numeric computations. Minsky is one of the founding fathers of artificial intelligence. He worked at the time at MIT, where Jim Slagle was his student. He later worked with, on an extension of the same program called SYN, another pun, I guess, Saint and Sin, Symbolic Integrator again, with Joel Moses, who went all the way to becoming provost at MIT. Something that is interesting here from the point of view of AI is that nobody thinks of symbolic integration as a part of artificial intelligence anymore. And this is typical of AI. Various problems that initially were considered part of artificial intelligence are now solved so commonly that we no longer think of them as requiring intelligence in the same sense as we used to. So symbolic integration is available in many computer packages used by engineers such as MATLAB, Maple, Mathematica, MathCAD. Some of you maybe have used MathCAD in high school. Okay, back now to the question that I was asked to address: is number 5 alive? Well, this is not an easy question to answer. In the story, in the movie, number 5 recognizes his mortality, and so in some sense you can argue becomes conscious of his mortality, and therefore you may argue becomes alive, consciously, when it kills a grasshopper accidentally. Sorry for telling you that, but there it is. And I think that the question whether number 5 is alive or not is truly a philosophical question and depends on a philosophical worldview. Marvin Minsky, one of the founding fathers of the field, who, by the way, died in January of this year. I always tell my students, you learn a lot about computer science by reading obituaries, because some of the founding fathers are disappearing now. Okay? Ours is a very new field. Well, he was in fact a materialistic realist, and for him, I think saying that number 5 was alive and it would be easy. There's a quote from a conversation between Minsky and Robert Barger, a philosopher at Notre Dame, who is a computer ethicist, that's somewhat interesting. Barger asked Minsky, do you agree that mental faculties are just the product of neural switches being in a certain configuration? And Minsky essentially answered yes, but he did it in a nuanced way. He said, yes, except that the terms, sorry for reading, like just or merely, miss the incredible complexity of the relations between cell switches or atoms. This is like saying that literature is just words. There should be a better word than reductionism to describe the view that the system's properties depend on the relationships between the parts. So, and then he goes on after a while and quote Percy Shelley, okay, Mary's husband, the poet. Percy Shelley wrote, it has been the persuasion of an immense majority of human beings that sensibility and thought, as distinguished from matter, are in their own nature less susceptible of division and decay. And then he goes on to say, however, it is probable that what we call thought is not an actual being, but no mean that the relation between certain parts of that infinitely varied mass of which the rest of the universe is composed. So again, this is a materialistic position. And again, if you subscribe to that worldview, it would be easier for you to accept that number 5 is in fact alive. Maybe more interesting from the point of view of artificial intelligence than the question, is number 5 alive, is the question, does number 5 think? And here, computer scientists have tried to answer this. The classic test of intelligence, intelligent thought if you like, is the Turing Test. And the Turing Test is a test that requires the following question: can a human interrogator distinguish a person from a machine by asking questions through a textual interface? Okay? And Turing's argument was, if the interrogator cannot distinguish a machine from a person through a keyboard and screen interface, textual interface, then the human interrogator would accept that the machine is thinking. The Turing test has many detractors, and most importantly, the American philosopher, the still living American philosopher John Searle, argued against the Turing test by describing a situation which is called the Chinese room experiment. I don't know whether any of you have heard of this. I'll try briefly to describe this. The idea is that you have a room within which there is someone, say Bob, and this person inside the room can communicate with the outside world only through a slot in the room through which slips of paper can be passed. Bob doesn't know Chinese, but he gets past slips of paper with questions in Chinese, simple questions in Chinese that any Chinese speaker would be able to answer. Again, Bob doesn't know Chinese, but he has a very large book that is indexed by Chinese characters. Bob is very good at pattern matching, and he can find in the book whatever is passed on the slip of paper that is given to him. And then Bob is also good at calligraphy. He can copy what is in the book corresponding to that pattern. And without understanding what he's doing, he copies the symbols and gives them back outside the slot. To someone outside the room, Bob appears to understand Chinese. He gets questions in Chinese. He responds with an answer in Chinese on the slip of paper. But Searle's argument is nobody would accept that Bob truly understands Chinese. Okay? And this is a very important argument because it shows you that there is a distinction between the behavior of something and what is really happening behind the appearances. There is a counter-argument, and I know I'm running out of time, but I would like to finish this. There is a counter-argument to the Chinese room experiment that I do want to mention because it is a complexity-based argument. It's a simple complexity-based argument. And from the point of view of computer scientists, complexity is very, very important. Okay? In computer science, complexity is very important. This is an argument due to Hector Levesque, who is a professor of computer science at the University of Toronto. And it's called the summation room argument. So you have the Turing test, you have the Chinese room argument, and now we have the summation room argument. The summation room argument works just like the Chinese room. Instead, inside the summation room, there is someone whom we'll call Charles. Charles does not know how to add numbers. It's really bad. You know how to add numbers, right? But Charles doesn't know how to add numbers. But he's given slips of paper where there are addition problems. And these addition problems are fairly long, but doable by anybody with a little time. They have 20 numbers, each with 10 digits. And Charles gets the slip of paper, and he doesn't know how to sum, but he has a book. And the book is indexed by the digits in the 20 numbers. So Charles looks at the digits. Again, he's good at pattern matching. He looks at the digits, finds the right page. On that page is the answer to the sum of the 20 numbers. He copies the numbers without understanding what is going on and gives it back through the slot. Again, from the outside world, it appears that Charles knows how to sum. The room is doing sums. But again, nobody would argue that Charles really knows how to sum. He's just looking into a big book. Well, the reason why this is important is that the book that Charles is consulting cannot possibly exist, because such a book would have to have 10 to the 200 entries, which is about, which is many, many, many orders of magnitude, many times the number of atoms in the known universe. Okay? So this cannot possibly be done, and what we have to accept is that in reality, Charles, in order to do these large sums, has to do sums in some algorithmic way, using some procedure as the ones that we have been taught in elementary school. Okay? It may not be the same procedure that we are taught in elementary school, but it must mean that more is happening than just consulting a big book. Okay? So you can, to finish the argument, you can very well imagine that answering questions in Chinese is at least as hard as doing the sums, because after all, the Chinese paper could just include the problem of summing the numbers written in Chinese. And so you would expect that, Bob has to be doing more than just consulting a big book in a silly way. Okay, this is really all I wanted to say, and clearly all of what I have time to say. Okay. But I do want to leave you with a small comment that is maybe a little biased, but again, today we are thinking of Brussels, we're thinking of Belgium. Some of us have lived there. And the article of the Belgian Weekly Gazette of 4 December 1986 again contains my wife's review of short circuit. I won't